Hello, dear friends. Today, I want to talk to you about something that concerns everyone who has ever lost a loved one. You know, in those moments when we stand by the casket of a loved one, among flowers and candles, surrounded by other mourners, many of us ask ourselves the same question. Is the soul of our loved one here now? Does it see us? Does it hear our farewell words? Does it feel our love and pain? These are not idle questions. They help us find comfort in moments of the sharpest pain. They give many hope that the connection is not completely broken, that some part of our loved ones is still with us. I recall the story of Barbara from Chicago. She lost her husband James after 43 years of marriage. At the funeral, when their favorite song was playing, the one they danced to at their wedding, Barbara felt a gentle touch on her shoulder. She turned around, but there was no one there. And at that moment, she realized, James is here, next to her. He is saying goodbye. He is telling her that he loves her, as he always did when he placed his hand on her shoulder. This may seem strange to those who have not experienced something like this, Barbara told me with tears in her eyes, but I knew for sure it was him. I felt his presence as clearly as I feel this cup in my hands right now. And Barbara is not alone in her feelings. Many of us have experienced something similar. A sudden scent of familiar perfume in an empty room, a song that unexpectedly starts playing on the radio, a chance encounter with a bird or a butterfly acting strangely, as if trying to grab your attention. We look for signs, and often we find them. Perhaps you have stood by the casket of your mother, father, spouse, or, heaven forbid, a child, and felt something strange, something that cannot be explained in words, something that made you believe they are still here, they see you, they know how much you love them and how deeply you miss them. Or maybe you felt nothing at all, and that made you doubt. It made you think, does it mean that their souls are truly not here? That the connection is severed forever? Today we will talk about this. We will discuss whether the souls of our loved ones are present at their own funerals. We will examine different points of view, from deeply religious individuals to skeptics. We will hear stories from those who believe they have communicated with their departed loved ones. And we will try to find comfort and understanding in this complex question that concerns each of us. Because in the end, it does not matter what we believe. What matters is what helps us cope with the pain of loss and move forward, cherishing the bright memories of those we loved and continue to love. So, let's ask the question that troubles many. Is a person's soul present at their own funeral? This question is not just a philosophical reflection. For many people, especially in times of grief, it has immense practical significance. After all, if the soul of a loved one is truly present beside us during the farewell, it changes the very nature of the ceremony. It transforms it from a goodbye to someone who is no longer here into a special form of communication with someone who has simply transitioned to a different state. For the grieving, this question often becomes central. It is so desirable to believe that our words of love and gratitude, which we did not have the chance to say during life, will still be heard, that our tears will be noticed, that our pain will be understood, and that perhaps we will receive some sign, some comfort from those we have lost. In different cultures and religious traditions, there are various beliefs about what happens to the soul after death. In Christianity, many believe that the soul continues to exist and may be near those it loved during life. In Judaism, it is believed that the soul remains close to the body for 7 days of mourning. Buddhists believe in a period called bardo, an intermediate state between death and rebirth, during which the soul can be aware of what is happening around it. But even outside of a religious context, many people intuitively feel that the connection with loved ones does not abruptly end after physical death. Martha from Boston told me, I am not a particularly religious person, but when my father Thomas died, I knew for sure that he was there at his funeral. I cannot explain or prove it, but that knowledge was absolutely real for me. And I think many of you can understand Martha, because some things we just know in our hearts, even if we cannot explain them rationally. It is important to understand that each person has the right to their own beliefs on this matter. There are no right or wrong answers when it comes to such deeply personal experiences. For some people, the belief in the presence of a loved one's soul at the funeral is a source of comfort and strength. For others, it is more important to focus on the memories and legacy left behind by the deceased. What is truly important is to respect different points of view and support each other in the process of mourning. which each person experiences in their own way. Perhaps we will never receive a definitive answer to the question of the soul's presence at funerals in this life. But the very search for an answer can help us better understand ourselves, our feelings, and our connection to those we have lost. And if deep down you feel that your loved one was near you on the day you said goodbye to them, trust that feeling. It is no less real than any other experience you have. Many people who have attended the funerals of loved ones report unusual signs and sensations that they interpret as evidence of the departed person's soul's presence. These signs can be barely noticeable or, conversely, so vivid that they cannot be ignored. And although skeptics may explain them as coincidences or products of imagination, for those who experience them, they often become a source of deep comfort. Elizabeth from Philadelphia shared with me a story that happened at her mother's funeral. You know, my mom always used the same perfume, Lily of the Valley with notes of vanilla, a very specific scent. During the farewell at the church, I suddenly smelled that scent, so strong, as if my mom were standing right next to me. I looked around, but there were no women nearby with a similar scent. The smell lasted for about a minute and then disappeared just as suddenly as it had appeared. I know for sure that it was a sign from my mom, her way of saying that she is here, with us. Such fragrant sensations are one of the most common signs reported by people. But there are others that are equally impressive. A sudden gust of wind on a calm day, a ray of sunlight breaking through the clouds at the most emotional moment of the ceremony, a rainbow unexpectedly appearing over the cemetery, a butterfly or bird that lands nearby and seems to observe what is happening. One of the most touching cases happened to John, who lost his wife Carol after 35 years of marriage. At the funeral, a violin was playing. Our son performed Carol's favorite melody, and suddenly one string broke. Everyone was confused, but immediately I remembered how Carol always said that if she died before me, she would definitely find a way to make a joke at her own funeral. It was so in her style, to create a little commotion to lighten the atmosphere. I laughed through my tears because I knew for sure it was her. Sometimes signs come through memories. During the funeral service, a person may suddenly recall a long-forgotten happy moment associated with the deceased. Such a sudden, vivid memory can feel like a gift from the soul of a loved one, a reminder that there's not only sorrow and loss, but also joy that this person has brought into our lives. Of course, our emotional state during funerals is especially vulnerable. We are open to experiences that we might overlook or ignore in normal life. Grief sharpens all our senses, making us more sensitive to the subtle signals of the surrounding world. And in this state of heightened sensitivity, we may pick up on those signs that would go unnoticed in everyday life. But does that mean these signs are less real? I don't think so. Perhaps it is in such moments of emotional openness that we are able to perceive what is usually hidden from us behind the veil of everyday life. Perhaps it is then that the boundaries between worlds become thinner, allowing the souls of our loved ones to find a way to say to us, "I am here. I see your pain. I still love you." Science, traditionally skeptical of everything that cannot be measured by instruments, has shown an increasing interest in recent decades in the phenomenon of near-death experiences and the possibility of consciousness existing beyond the physical body. Numerous studies conducted in various countries around the world show astonishing results that make even the most convinced materialists ponder. According to a large study, about 18% of people who have experienced clinical death report that their consciousness left their body. They describe how they observed what was happening from above, could see the actions of the medical personnel, and hear the conversations that took place at the moment of their clinical death. Some even reported details that they could not possibly know while being in an unconscious state. Robert, a cardiologist from New York with 30 years of experience, shared his story with me. "You know, I started out as an absolute skeptic. I was convinced that consciousness is just a function of the brain, and when the brain stops working, consciousness disappears. But after 20 years of working with patients who have experienced clinical death, I changed my mind. There are too many unexplained cases, too many coincidences that cannot be attributed to chance." He was particularly struck by the case of an elderly patient, Susan, who after resuscitation accurately described an unusual brooch that the nurse had removed and placed in her pocket before the procedure began. Susan could not have seen this brooch with her normal vision. Her eyes were closed, and her heart was not beating. It is important to understand that modern science does not dismiss people's spiritual experiences, but tries to understand them. It is expanding the boundaries of its search, recognizing that there are phenomena that do not yet fit into existing theories. And this opens new perspectives for understanding what happens to us after physical death. Research is ongoing, and perhaps in the future we will receive more definitive answers to the question of the existence of consciousness beyond the body, and whether the soul of the deceased can be present at their own funeral. For now, science and spirituality are walking parallel paths, sometimes intersecting at the most unexpected points. If we look at the beliefs of various cultures and religions about the soul after death, we find an astonishing diversity of beliefs, but also some common traits that are observed almost everywhere. Many traditions agree that the soul does not disappear instantly, but goes through a certain transitional period. In the Christian tradition, which is particularly prevalent in America, there are various views on this issue. Some believe that the soul immediately goes either to heaven, to hell, or to purgatory. Others believe that the soul can remain near those it loved during life for some time, especially during the period of farewell and burial. Many Christians feel the presence of their departed loved ones and perceive this as a blessing and comfort from God. Sarah from Texas, a deeply religious Christian, shared her story. "When my father died, I was in despair. But during the funeral, I felt such peace, such certainty that he was with us and with God at the same time. It was almost a tangible feeling of his presence that gave me the strength to get through that day." In the Jewish tradition, it is believed that the soul remains near the body for 7 days after death. This is why there is the custom of Shiva, a 7-day mourning period when relatives gather in the home of the deceased. It is a time when the soul is still nearby, and the living can express their love and respect through prayer and memories. David, a rabbi from New Jersey, explains, "In our tradition, we believe that the soul does not wish to leave the body and the world it knows. It gradually distances itself, sometimes returning to the places and people that were dear to it. Funerals are a special time when the soul is closest to us, watching how we honor the memory of the person it was in the physical world." In Eastern traditions, such as Buddhism and Hinduism, there is the concept of an intermediate state for the soul between death and rebirth. In Buddhism, this state is called bardo and can last up to 49 days. During this time, the soul may observe the reactions of loved ones to its death and the funeral rituals. It is noteworthy that regardless of cultural and religious differences, people around the world report similar feelings of the presence of their departed loved ones. This makes us ponder that behind all the diversity of beliefs, there may be a universal truth about the nature of the soul and its journey after physical death. Many of us seek ways to maintain a connection with our departed loved ones, and this is perfectly natural. There are various practical approaches that help create a personal space for such communication without self-deception and unhealthy fixation on the loss. Creating personal rituals of farewell and remembrance can become an important part of the healing process. You can designate a special place in your home where there will be photos, mementos, and perhaps a candle that you occasionally light on special days or when you feel the need to talk to the departed. Such a memory corner becomes a symbolic bridge between worlds. Michael from Oregon found his way to maintain a connection with his wife, Linda, who passed away after a long battle with illness. "I started keeping a journal of our conversations. Every evening, I write her a letter about what happened during the day, share my thoughts, sometimes ask questions. And you know what? Sometimes I feel like I'm getting answers. Not in the form of words, of course, but in the form of sudden insights or strange coincidences. For example, I asked her if she would approve of my moving to another city, and the next day I accidentally met an old friend who had just returned from that very city and told me all its pros and cons. I took it as a response from Linda. To recognize the signs of the presence of loved ones without self-deception, it is worth adhering to several principles. First and foremost, maintain openness and attentiveness to the surrounding world, but do not interpret every coincidence as a message. Pay attention to recurring signs, especially if they have personal significance or are related to the distinctive traits of the departed person. Some people find comfort in speaking aloud to their deceased loved ones, especially when at their graves or in places that were significant to them. Others prefer a mental dialogue or meditation, during which they imagine meeting and conversing with the loved one. It is important to remember that maintaining a healthy connection with the departed does not mean denying the reality of death or refusing to move forward in life. Rather, it is an acknowledgement that love and connection between people can exist in another form even after physical separation. Such practice can help integrate the loss into your life and find a new way of relating to the one you lost. Ultimately, these methods work because they reflect a profound truth. Those we loved continue to live in us, in our memories, values, and actions inspired by them. From a psychological perspective, the belief in the presence of the soul of a deceased loved one can play an important therapeutic role in the process of experiencing grief. Research shows that continuing bonds with the deceased help the bereaved find meaning in their loss and adapt to a new reality. Modern psychologists are moving away from the old model that suggested that healthy grieving requires complete letting go of the deceased. Instead, it is recognized that maintaining an internal connection with those who have passed can be beneficial for psychological well-being. Margaret, a psychologist with many years of experience, explains, "When a person loses a loved one, love remains and seeks new ways of expression. The belief that the soul of the loved one is nearby can become a bridge that helps to rebuild life." It is important to distinguish between healthy belief and unhealthy denial. Healthy belief provides comfort and strength to move forward. Unhealthy fixation causes one to become emotionally stuck in the past. Many people feel the presence of the departed, even without prior spiritual beliefs. Thomas, who lost his son, shares, "I have always been a rationalist, but after Michael's death, I felt his presence so vividly, as if he were standing next to me. This experience gave me more comfort than all the words of support." In conclusion to our conversation, I want to say, regardless of what we believe, love does not end with the death of a loved one. It continues to live in our hearts, memories, and actions. And if you feel the presence of your loved one's soul at their funeral or afterwards, trust that feeling. There is nothing strange or wrong about it. The Anderson family from Minnesota found deep comfort in feeling the presence of Grandma Helen at her funeral. "We all felt an inexplicable warmth and peace, despite our grief," shares grandson Daniel. "And since then, each of us maintains our connection with Grandma in our own way. Some through prayer, some through regular visits to the cemetery, and I through her favorite recipes, which I cook on special occasions." Remember that grief is a journey that has no clear map or timeline. Each person experiences it in their own way. And along this path, the feeling of the presence of those we have lost can become a source of strength and comfort. I sincerely hope that our conversation has brought you some relief if you are currently experiencing a loss. Know that you are not alone in your feelings and experiences. Take care of yourself and allow yourself to believe in what brings you peace and healing. In closing, I want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to engage in our conversation about such a deep and personal topic. Thank you for being with us today, for allowing yourself to reflect, and perhaps to remember your loved ones who have already passed. If this conversation has been helpful to you or touched something in your soul, please subscribe to our channel. There are many more topics ahead that we will discuss with the same attention and respect. Click the subscribe button right now so you don't miss new videos. And don't forget to share this video with those who may need support in the process of grieving. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Until next time.